Joining us now is Joel Rubin, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. Joel, what's your response to Pompeo's speech?
Well, David, it was a shamefully partisan speech. It's one that an American Secretary of State should not deliver in a foreign capital. They should not be criticizing a former president of the United States. But beyond that, it really was ahistorical. It didn't seem to understand. He didn't seem to express a real understanding of what it is that got us to the point that we're in today in the Middle East. Is sort of a simplistic blaming of Obama for every ill in the region. And the result is that we had a meandering speech with a lot of contradictory rhetoric within it, lots of talking points, but no real clear vision or clarity about how the United States is going to advance our interests and support our allies and advance our values overall in the region. It was very disappointing.
One of the themes, though, from Secretary of State Pompeo is that by the Obama administration reaching the deal with Iran and trusting that Iran would curtail its influence across the region and not engage in, say, support for proxies in Syria, that by making that misjudgment, it essentially emboldened Iran and essentially made Syria and perhaps even Lebanon more dangerous.
Yeah, Iran is a major player and a major factor and a major problem, frankly, for American policy in the region. There's no doubt about that. But he's mixing cause and effect. President Obama did not make Iran a difficult country. President Obama came into office where the United States was in deep, dire straits in Iraq, and with Iran next door advancing a nuclear program without constraint. And so he engaged in a multilateral process to arrest that program. But that didn't mean that he dealt with all the other problems. And it is troubling that the Obama administration, we didn't get it right on all those counts. But to say that that's the cause, that somehow Iran before 2008, 2009 was behaving well and there was no problem, it's just, again, a misread. And it makes it harder to have good solutions going forward on how to constrain Iran and deal with their hegemonic activities in the region.
One other theme from Pompeo, and that is that the United States withdrawing from Iraq the way it did, the drawdown of troops, that enabled Islamic State, Islamic fanaticism to grow. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think it is a fair assessment, but again, for some reason, he's blaming President Obama. And it was interesting in the speech, Secretary Pompeo spoke about how partner countries in the Middle East would work with us and invite us in. Well, the Iraqi government in 2011 didn't want us in and actually wanted us to depart from the country. It was clearly, in hindsight, overall a strategic mistake, and we saw the horrible results of that in 2014 with the rise of ISIS. But to put that all on President Obama after we had stood up an Iraqi government and it seemed like it was in a position to transition, clearly it wasn't, that's not exactly one man's fault. And I think that, again, that makes it very difficult to understand how we're going to execute the war against ISIS going forward. What are we going to do in Syria? There was no clarity. What happens when the troops leave? How can we have the same mission, as the Secretary said today, with 2,000 troops gone? He didn't really square those circles. So I think that people in the region will have more questions tomorrow as a result of this speech than they did before.
Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. And Joel, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's turn now to